Hi, friends. Good day to you. Today, I want to do this video to be titled Living in a World That Was Not Made for Us. When we talk about the world, it can mean many things to different people at different times. For the most part, people think of the world as what was supposedly made by God. That involved the earth, the universe, and all its planets. But there is another world that I want to talk about. It is true that the universe is made for just about every living thing in it, but we are in a world today that was made by a sect or a subsect of those who occupy the earthly part of the universe where others of us are as well. And it was made for them and not for us. And that's basically the world I want to talk about because, most people just don't think of the world as being created by humans because for them, the word world only mean that which humans cannot create: the universe, the planet, the oceans, and all the things that are in it. But human beings who find themselves living in that world found ways to create niches or to create a world within a world. So we now live in a world order that was not made by us, was not made with our participation. I allude to the fact that black nations of the world have not been self governed for a very long time. If you think about black nations that were former slave societies, if you talk about the black nations in the African continent, the reality is not much different. In the 19th centuries, the 19th century, the European nations carved up the continent of Africa and colonized it. And so most, if not all, the countries in Africa today are basically living some of the realities of that meeting in Germany where Africa was carved up for European colonization. And during their colonization, they have made a world for themselves, and African nations now find itself having to play or participate in that world that was not made for them. I get back to that point. When you think about the Caribbean and the hemisphere surrounding the Caribbean, like South America, Central America, and the Caribbean, these nations gained their independence in relatively recent times. And having gained their independence, most of these nations find themselves following European model of governance. For example, those post-slave societies that were former colonies of the British Empire speaks about following the Westminster style or the Westminster model. And other nations that have been colonized by other European nations, the French, the Portuguese, the Spaniards, the Germans, they find themselves following those nations' models. So if you see the point I'm trying to make, is that black nations, whether on the continent of Africa or in the African diaspora, we find ourselves following models of governance that were not made for us. Those who were the colonizers, they have themselves made the system to benefit them. To this day, the continent of Africa, which is so rich in natural resources, find itself poor, you know, and the nations that they were colonized to are the largest beneficiaries of the wealth and natural resources of the various countries on the continent. And those of us outside the continent, but former post slave societies, those persons to whom we were colonized are the main beneficiaries of the system that they set up. Now, when this world order, people talk about a new world order, but it's pretty much an evolution of what the old world order is. But whether the old world order or the new world order, one thing remains the same. It was set up without our participation, our input, and it was made not for us. In fact, when the world order as is today was put in place, the persons who were putting it in place never envisioned black societies being free. Never envisioned that. And that is something that we should never lose sight of. That when the world as is presently constituted was constituted, those who formed it, those who framed it, had no plans or intention for black nations and black people to be free. But we fought our way to some extent to emancipation, to freedom, and to independence. But having succeeded in those endeavors, we still find ourselves having to eke out an existence within the framework of those persons who made a world for themselves and not for us. Can we beat them at their game? Not easy. Not easy. Marcus Garvey said that history is a guidepost of a people. And when we look back through the pages of history, if we were to go as far back as to where this present era started, some 2,000 plus years ago, when the world changes from BC to CE, Common Era, or AD, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, what we have seen from that time, AD, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, 2,000 plus years ago, the Romans dominated the world. And so when the man Jesus was on the earth, he was born under Roman rule, under the Roman Empire. And so, and I mentioned the Roman Empire because I'm talking about white dominance from then. So this present era, this AD era, in the year of our Lord, or in the year of the Lord, or their Lord, whichever way you look at it, white dominance frame the world structures. And so we now find ourselves in the 20th century. Black nations became self-ruling nations in the 20th century. So those who were in the 1950s, like in Ghana, those of us, some of us in the Caribbean in the 1960s and 70s, you know, we find ourselves in a situation where we have to participate as full participants in a world that was made without our input. And let's not fool ourselves. The framers of the world did it for them. I mentioned earlier that when they were doing it, there was no intention that there should be black governments, black independence. That was not part and parcel of the plan. So when we try to set up our economic situation to benefit ourselves, there's a world body like the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that can blacklist us. And when they blacklist us, we have to straighten up. And like children to parents, we have to obediently go and restructure and adjust our economic positioning just to be in their good books. And if we decide to set up plants and factories that they think disadvantage theirs, then they penalize us for loans. Lest we forget that there was a Goodyear tire manufacturing plant or factory in the Caribbean, in Jamaica. And lending agencies forced the Jamaican government to close it so that we can buy tires from, the tire companies of the world. We think about medicinal drugs, those who claim the right, who have the patent for them. And so we're supposed to be a consumer nation. The people who framed the world did it just like that. How are we going to get out of it? If you notice that the framers of this present world order do not like any nation that do not embrace their version of capitalism as well as their version of democracy. For example, there is a head-on conflict or collision between Western nations that embrace Christianity and nations of other parts of the world that embrace Islam, for example, or even Hinduism. Those nations eke out a world for themselves where they do not want to be dictated to by the persons who frame the world, especially the Western world in its present order. And so, as black folks, black nations, we seriously have to ask ourselves how long we are going to continue to play by the rules of these guys. How long are we going to play by their rules? They set up our laws. Our jurisprudence is dictated to by them. And so we can only make decisions that is in line with decisions acceptable to them. Simply because the world is theirs, not ours. So if we feel in the back of our mind that we are equal players in the world, we're making a very big mistake. Black folks like to assert themselves and said that they're not inferior, they're equal. But the reality is that we're not equal. We are not equal. Whether we like it, yes or no, we occupy an inferior role in the world because we are living in a world made for us by others and not by us ourselves. So that's inferiority. We have to face it. And it's not just to say that I bleed and you bleed, whichever race you are, you have hair on your head, other people have hair on their head. That you have blood running through your vein, they have blood running through their vein. Yes, we're all equal human beings in that regard. We're all equal human beings. Our evolution is the same. But we are living in a world order into which we are not equal players. We're not equal partners. Right now we find ourselves in a situation where we can't even set up a vaccination program properly because we have to depend on others to provide us with vaccines. You would feel that after our independence, we would seek to take care of those matters ourselves. You know, we have established universities in the West Indies from in the 1960s, and you'd feel that the natural progression would be to go on to set up laboratories so where we can do research ourselves, make our vaccine ourselves. But to this day, it's still yet not our reality. And so we find ourselves now fighting over whether we can trust vaccines provided by other nations. You know, it's unfortunate, but that's where we find ourselves. So I want for us to seriously ponder this question. If we are equal players in the world, we know we're not. How long are we going to be like this? You know, when are we going to create a world for ourselves where we dominate that world, where we dictate that world? Can we do it? Garvey said, yes, we can. We weren't made inferior as human beings. We weren't made inferior as far as our intellect, our intellectual capacities are concerned. No, we weren't. But we find ourselves occupying an inferior position in the world because we find ourselves comfortably living in a world that was made not for us, made by others for others, and we are trying now to fight our way to find some level of equality in this world. It's like fighting a losing battle, you know. So I want for us to seriously start thinking at a level where we now need to start inculcating in our children the unjustness, the unreasonableness, the unfairness of a world that we are forced to live in that was not made for us, it was not made by us, was not made with our input into it. And it is plainly not right. You know, it's bordering nonsensical, it's bordering foolishness for us to be so comfortably trying to sit comfortably in a world made by others for them, and we are in it fighting for equal place in a world that was never made for us. You know, black people are not capitalists by nature. It's not that we're not good at business, but by nature, black people are not greedy commercial capitalists. That's not our nature. But that's the world order that we find ourselves in. And we find ourselves having to make do in it. Find ourselves having to exploit each other. You know, see, some blacks have been forced to employ other blacks for slave wages that are not livable. You know, governments, our governments, are forced to accept situations where, you know, their citizens have to be employed for not livable wage because this world was not made for us. We didn't participate in making it. We would make it so. We have governments, but they are not real leaders. They're not leading us out of this situation. Are we trapped in it for the rest of our lives? The next 50 years, the next 60 years, the next 100 years, are we going to still finding ourselves in a world not made for us? Why can't we make a world for ourselves? What stops us? The black race collectively outnumber a number of other races. So why can't we find a world for ourselves? Why can't we design a system that works for us? I challenge us today to let us think about this. Yeah? Let's think about it. Give me your feedback on this video. If you have not yet done so, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button. To those of you who already subscribed, I want to say thank you very much for the feedback I receive from you from time to time. And we hope to continue to make videos that, you know, help you to think. So until the next time, so long.